Let's speak first of all to economist Jonathan Davis. A very good morning to you, Jonathan.
Hello, Louise.
Don't want to get too technical here, so kind of half put on your economy hat, but half put on your layman's hat as well. When we talk about poverty in 2014, can you define it for me?
We can define it, I would suggest, by people not having enough money to properly feed, clothe and house themselves. I would suggest that we are, unfortunately, turning Japanese. Japan went into a depression for a generation, started in 1989. They're only now just possibly coming out of it. I think we're following them largely due to successive government policies. They handed and continue to hand hundreds of billions of pounds to the banks, and we've got this ridiculously low interest rate. Both of these were set originally by Labour. The Tories and Lib Dems have continued it. Unfortunately, it helps the minority and it screws the majority.
So what's the answer?
Not that it will ever happen, but I think we need to, as I've said to your colleague Kay Adams many, many times, we need to have a radical about-turn for what we're doing. Instead of screwing the savers, the tenants, and the prudent, we should instead hammer, there's no other way about it, the reckless borrowers and the reckless lenders. We need to hike interest rates. We need to let businesses that have failed go bust. That way, the cost of living will collapse, business costs will collapse, therefore employment can rise and standards of living can rise. By continuing down this road, the poor are getting poorer and the middle class are getting poorer. The rich, of course, are getting richer.
So are we seeing a new poor effectively emerging here?
I believe we have. I've been saying to our wealth management clients for the last couple of years that if we are turning Japanese, as I say, a generational depression, then those who have been middle class, by however you define it, they've got money and property, they've got savings, they've got pensions, they've got middle class jobs, whatever, many of them over a generation will no longer be middle class because, first of all, they've been encouraged to borrow massively and they think everything's okay because it's against the value of property. Well, the assumption therein is that property is never going to fall. I think that's an unrealistic assumption. And if we are right, then whatever wealth they have in their property will go. Secondly, they're not saving into pensions. So basically, over the long term, the middle class will have no assets.
Okay.
And of course, because our whole society and economy is basically fueled by debt, if the debt doesn't continue rising forever, then many of the middle class jobs, whether it's, I don't know, in restaurants or leisure, airlines, estate agency, even accountancy and law, for example, they will be gone. So the middle class, much of them, will have no assets and no income. They will be, astoundingly perhaps, in the sub-poor.
Okay.
The poor will always be poor. I know that sounds terrible, but there you go. The middle class, many of them, are going sub-poor.
Let me go to the phone lines and see whether Linda agrees with you. Linda, you're on the line from Ayrshire. I know you're listening intently to what Jonathan Davis has been saying there. Can you relate to any of this?
Oh, absolutely. He should be talking to David Cameron. I just echo everything he's just said. I would say I was middle class and my family was middle class. All these people that say there wasn't a welfare system, that people are messing up with their benefits, that is such a small percent. I was unemployed, as my husband was, for 2 years. And I can honestly say, until you've been in that situation, you've really got no idea what it's like to be on the breadline. It's hard to get benefits. It's not enough to get by. My pensioner mother and my pensioner mother-in-law gave us money which they could ill afford to pay our heating bills, our water, which we cut down massively. I didn't use the food bank, but you'd have to make the decision, do I buy some toilet rolls or do I buy a bread loaf? We got a hamper from, a local food box from the local church before one Christmas, and it made the difference. I get so angry when people say, oh, everybody should learn to tighten their belts. We couldn't have tightened them anymore. I've sold all my jewellery bar my engagement ring. And it is the middle class. There aren't the jobs there. If there's no jobs, how can people get out of the trap? And that's the problem. And exactly right, what Jonathan has said. Yes, the poor will be poor, the rich will be rich, but it's the people in the middle now who are starting to fall down and down and down. And at the moment, unless something's radically done, it's a joke to say the recession's over. It's just going to get worse and worse.
Linda, many thanks indeed for your call. Let's go to Fife. Andy is on the line. Andy, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. What do you say to Linda? She and her husband were unemployed for 18 months. She said she had to sell everything bar her engagement ring just to make ends meet. What do you want to say?
Well, I can understand that. I can certainly sympathise with her. My experience is a bit different. A couple of years ago, through our church, we started it basically on a Friday night to help young people soup and bread and just basically talk to them on a Friday night, coming or going to the pub. And then it developed, we were given bread from a shop in Stirling, free bread and cakes. You're talking about 12 black bin bags full of bread and numerous cakes. So we started to reach out to our local community, to things like Scottish Society for the Mentally Handicapped, with cakes, a local hospital, and target families with bread. But then we found out it was a bit about poverty of choice, because I can give you two examples. When we collected the bread one night, there was two guys sitting outside. They were selling Big Issue, and they said, where does the bread go to? And we explained homeless. They said, what about us? We're homeless. They were sitting with a large carry-out. And I simply said to them, well, why don't you take some of your cans back, and get a refund? You can buy something to eat. Now, I got a phone call later on that afternoon from the Big Issue office, who basically said, well, it's basically, the way we look at it is, what they can spend their own money in is up to them. And I said, well, the way we look at it is, if they can afford to buy alcohol, they can afford to buy bread. Another occasion, we went to a family, we gave them bread. They said, oh, we desperately need this bread. We desperately need it. We really need it badly. I went back next week and they're sitting smoking cannabis. Now, if they can afford to buy cannabis, they can afford to buy bread. It basically boils down to poverty of choice. My wife comes from a part of the world where they have real poverty, the Philippines. But it's people's definition here seems to be, I'm poor because I don't have the latest flat screen TV. That's a definition of poverty.
OK, that's an interesting point. Let me go back to Ewan Gurr from the Trussell Trust. Ewan, we heard from you just before the news. You are helping to support people who use food banks. How do you know that the people coming to you, queuing up to get food, are genuinely in need? Do you carry out any checks on them?
Absolutely. We've had 56,000 men, women and children that have been referred to our food banks in Scotland since April 2013, and every one of them has been referred by a statutory or voluntary agency. And we work on a referral basis to ensure that when people are utilising food banks, they're not only being provided with food, but they're actually getting support in the long term. So the rhetoric that we're hearing that people are misusing their money, it's just absolute nonsense. When you walk into someone's house and there's no carpet on the floor, there's no wallpaper on the walls, and you know for a fact that that person isn't misusing their money on alcohol or substances because they've been referred from a service that is just saying this family is in dire need. I mean, we need to just get away from that rhetoric. It's nonsense. And I think the figures speak for themselves. 1,070 people used a food bank in Scotland in 2006, 2007. That number rose to 14,318 in 2012, 2013. And that number has quadrupled to over 56,000 in the last 12 months. I mean, if we look at the statistics, we go and visit the families, rather than just talking about, the people that guy referred to, those are not the kind of people that are utilising food banks. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
So I think it's not helpful to give those kind of analogies and try and co-opt the argument to say that these people are the people that are using food banks. It's just complete nonsense.
OK, let's go to the phone lines again. We've got Nikki on the line. Nikki, I know you want to take issue with something that Jonathan Davis had to say. He's listening in. Off you go.
Yes, indeed, Louise. I feel that the gentleman, I have never been so angry in the whole of my life at something that someone has said on the radio. I'm astounded with the fact that he's trying to attack people in small businesses that have huge loans in order to keep these businesses open, which I do. I built my business up from scratch. I employ 12 people. I pay a vast amount of tax to the government. And what we should really be attacking is not necessarily the people who are on middle incomes that are working very hard, but to attack the people who are in big businesses who are not paying tax, who are avoiding tax, who are going through Ireland and etc. not to pay tax. These are the people we should be targeting, not people who are out there working day after day to employ people like myself.
Okay, Jonathan, you're listening. Do you want to come back?
Yeah. Clearly, this is a slight change of tact as to the point of the objective of the conversation. However, the lady's right. Multinational businesses who are doing business in the UK and making millions, tens of millions, maybe even billions of profits in the UK, base their head offices outside of the UK, and through using very expensive accountants, they don't pay tax. That is a disgrace. That's the way successive governments have set it up. So that has to be sorted. On the point, however, of the small, medium-sized business, which is no doubt the engine of any growth that we have in this country, being attacked for having debts and whatever, let me tell the lady that the only reason why many businesses are still afloat is because the interest rate was slashed to practically nothing. But the point is, all that does is effectively, it's like taking an aspirin when you have cancer. What instead we need to do is rip the cancer out of the economy, take debt out of the economy. In other words, stop people being able to borrow because they can fog a mirror. That's the way we will get long-term prosperity in this economy, in this society, as opposed to potentially being in a generational depression.
All right, Jonathan, I know you feel passionately about it, but I think Nikki does too. Nikki, come back in.
I really don't know. I feel that the gentleman who's speaking is reading from a socialist principle book, saying that we should be taking the money away from the people who are working hard. Now, I work 7 days a week. I work from first thing in the morning till last thing at night. I employ 12 people. If you increase the interest rates, I'm out of business. And that's 12
and three-quarters of the population...
Excuse me, Mr. Davis, I did not interrupt you. I gave you your time. Now you let me speak. You are speaking from a cloud. Now, I take it by the way that you speak, perhaps you are from the middle classes. Now, I consider myself to be from the working class, raising myself into the middle class. I work incredibly hard. I don't have a large house. I don't have a large car. I don't have a large TV. This is what you're saying, that people are borrowing money in order to squander it. Well, I don't. I don't have any savings because, unfortunately, I don't want to let people go. I don't want to sack people. So I took out a loan in order to do that. But what you're going to do is, a lot of people like myself, you are going to put under. You should be targeting people that do not pay tax, not people that are working incredibly hard. You are generalising us all. No, sorry, Mr. Davis, still speaking. You're generalising every single person under the one bracket. It's ridiculous in this today's society, when we're quite wealthy in today's society, that we have things like food banks, but I fully support them. I hand a lot of money into them. I have a tin on both of my shops where people actually put money into it. It's disgusting that they're there, but they are there in order. Now, I grew up in a scheme. I brought myself up from nothing, so I've been there. I've been very, very poor. I take it that you've never been poor.
Louise, surprising as it may sound, this lady and I have a lot in common. We're both small business people, but the difference is she doesn't get that the society and the economy that we're in, the reason why there's a growth in food banks is because the cost of living is soaring. The reason why the cost of living is soaring is because we've got this extremely low interest rate, which means that our currency is kept down. If we had normalized interest rates, our currency would rise, our import costs would fall, our costs of living would
Jonathan,
fall.
You're kind of going over ground. Jonathan, you're going over ground that you have already gone over, and I don't want to go off message this morning. We're asking, is Scotland facing a poverty crisis? Are food banks here to stay? OK, that's what we're focusing on. Let's get back on track. Nikki, many thanks indeed for your call. You certainly are a real voice, and real voices are what we want to hear on Morning Call here on BBC Radio Scotland.